Welcome back, everyone. We are back on Planet of the Daleks, episode 5. It's nearly over now. I know, thank you guys for bearing with me on my seemingly pointless rambles as I talk about 70s Doctor Who. It's been a bit of a joyride, and I actually can't wait to do more of these in the future, especially if you guys like them. And even if you don't, then hey, I'm gonna do what I want. I'm gonna do what makes me feel good. But yeah, let's start up. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so episode 5 here is personally where I think the serial drags a bit. You've got like the pointless introduction of these new creatures of the night. I don't know if they're supposed to be Spyridinians or if they're supposed to be some sort of new creature, but there's these weird creatures of the night that the Doctor has to scare away with fire. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, what the fuck is the point of these things in the story? Because they never come up again. And then you've got Weber, who's running off pointlessly to try and blow up the Daleks. Obviously, he gets captured. And obviously, he dies. He ends up failing. And it's just like, all of this, when they get to the Plane of Stones, that's when this story stalls a lot. You know, that's when the story's sort of like, okay, so what are we doing now? Why aren't we going and just doing, and putting it into the Daleks already? And maybe this stuff would have been warranted, like maybe this sort of fleeing further from the Dalek city, maybe it would have been warranted if, like I suggested, the Supreme Dalek landed in episode 3 or episode 4. And that was like the cliffhanger for one of those episodes. You have the Supreme Dalek landing, and he's not taking shit from anyone. He's gonna kill the Daleks who have been irresponsible, you know, the ones that have lost track of the prisoners. He's gonna take shit over, and he's just gonna find these guys. Maybe it would have been more warranted then to move to the Plane of Stones. But as it is right now, these Daleks don't seem all too competent, despite being scientists, apparently. And our heroes are just sort of outrunning them. As you can see right now, they've managed to take a Spyridinian by surprise. And I'm just going to call them Spyridinians instead of Spyridans, because that sounds way too much like the planet Spyridon. Anyway, they take the furs off this invisible creature's body now, so that they can disguise themselves as these things. And it brings more attention to the fact that the Spyridinians don't really need to be invisible for this story to work. The only reason they're invisible, I think, is because Terry Nation wanted to have a reveal at the end of episode 1, where you figure out the Daleks are also turning invisible. You know, they're figuring out ways to do that. But the problem with that is, A, it's not really a fucking twist reveal, because your story's called Planet of the Daleks. B, we know that we're after the Daleks here. The Doctor knows this. Joe basically knows this, that we're going after the Daleks from Frontier in space. And C, the invisibility thing's never brought up again. So you either run with the invisibility concept and make the Spyridinians invisible, make the Daleks invisible, make some shit like that happen, or you don't, and you just make the Spyridinians visible. Because right now, like, them being invisible is basically not even a part of the plot anymore. You know, them being invisible is just because you've got the Thals here that are wearing the Spyridinian furs just to disguise themselves as Spyridinians. And the Spyridinians being invisible is just pointless at this point in the story, because the Daleks aren't invisible. It doesn't matter that the Spyridinians aren't invisible, because they're basically visible. So it's just a little confusing. This story, as with most six-parters, unfortunately, in Classic Who, except for a rare few examples, you know, like Genesis of the Daleks, except for a few examples like that, six-parters in Classic Who, for the most part, could have been 4 or 5-parters, but the runtime's padded out for some reason. Most likely for budgetary concerns, because obviously, if you have a bunch of 4-part stories, that means you're producing more sets, you have to make more props and stuff. So that basically means that there's, you know, more money having to go into the production of the show, which obviously the BBC hates. Especially at this point in time. Not actually. Like, right now, I think, in 70s especially, Doctor Who was actually one of the highest grossing shows on the platform. So it's sort of hard to explain why they didn't get more funding than they should have. I'm sorry, by the way. I had to turn my fan on real quick, because it is actually getting really hot in here. I hope that doesn't bother you guys too much. Right, here they're talking about the Dalek weakness to coldness. Oh, that famous Dalek weakness, vulnerability that all of us know about. I quite like this this Wester character here, because he's a Spyridinian that somehow avoided capture. And he's just sort of a helpful dude. And he's actually got a character, as opposed to the rest of the Spyridinians, which are essentially voiceless. You know, like, I don't even think they talk. They're just mindless servants of the Daleks. It would have been interesting to have maybe that could have been a way to pad out the runtime. You know, instead of doing this weird Plane of Stones stuff, you could have had more Spyridinian characters wanting to revolt against the Daleks. Oh, speaking of padding out the runtime, I sort of missed my opportunity to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it now, just because I'm sort of running out of things on my mind to talk about. I love how those creatures of the night that went to attack the group while they were camping out, I love that they were afraid of fire, right? So the first thing the Doctor thinks of is for everyone to grab a torch, thereby reducing the size of the fire, because everyone's taking sticks out of the fire. And his idea is to wave them around at the creatures to get them to back up. And everyone has to have a torch with them. This doesn't make sense, because A, if you guys were all sitting close enough to the fire, then that'll repel them anyway. They're not going to go close to you if you're sitting, like, fucking right by the fire. And B, waving around a torch like that is liable to set it out. You know, like, fire actually goes out if you wave it a little too harshly. But, I don't know, it just seemed like a bit of a waste of the fire that they had. And obviously, the only reason those creatures are there is to build suspension for threats that basically don't exist, and to pad out red time. Which is one of the biggest, like, I love Classic Who. I love Classic Who more than New Who, but especially, like, God. I quite dislike New Who in a lot of areas. Whereas opposed to Classic Who, it's sort of like a hateful dislike I have for, even in the worst stories of Classic Who, I'm like, it's sort of tongue-in-cheek, my hatred for it. So, but that being said, one of the biggest problems with this, one of the biggest notable problems with Classic Who, is how they just pointlessly pad out the runtime. And I shouldn't say pointlessly, because obviously there were budgetary concerns, but maybe that's a BBC fault. Maybe they should have been giving this show more money, allowing it to succeed better. Oh, that was a bit of a voice crack there. Sorry for that one, guys. Here, I'll let you have a little chuckle at that for a second. I was gonna say, I wonder if, like, I want to look at every period of the show. You know, sort of like either every doctor or every script editor or every showrunner. I want to look at just certain eras of the show and see when the show got the most funding from the BBC. I reckon it'll be the Russell T Davies era. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know how I'd even I don't even know how I'd figure that out though. I couldn't really tell. I just um going off of what I know about the show and going off of inflation and all that shit, I'm gonna say the period in which the most Dolans were getting pumped into Doctor Who was probably the David Tennant era, like season 3 and 4 especially. Even though, I mean, the budget nowadays with series 11 and 12 It's really nice looking. You know, it looks like a cinematic show. So I wonder how they're making that budget work. You know, I wonder how thin they're spreading it in order to get that shit in there, because it really does look like you're watching a movie. That's one of the best parts about Series 11, is that it looks so good. And I shouldn't even say that's really one of the best parts, because my favorite thing about Doctor Who is when you can tell it's a low-budget sci-fi show that has a lot of heart put into it. I love the wobbly sets and the bad effects, and that's just speaking from my personal penchants for what I like in cinema. You know, I love when you have practical effects, when you can tell that there's some sort of prop or some actor there. And that's not everyone's cup of tea, and I understand that. And that's why I don't usually factor it into proper debates as to what is good and what is bad in media. Yeah, I wonder, so here you got Joe, who's going away with Latep, and she's gonna be like working with him with his bomb or whatever, while the other crew goes off and melts some Daleks in ice. And the Doctor acts surprised, as if he'd preferred Joe to help them directly push Daleks around into molten ice. You know, I like did he? Because what's going through his head is either Joe is going to help them kill the Daleks, or Joe is going to just stay there, you know, alone. um, like he acts so surprised when she wants to go with Latep, when really that was probably the safest choice for her to make. I think I talked about this a little earlier on in the commentary tracks. I talked about how Pertwee's doctor doesn't work with the Daleks, and I think it's because I do this A-B thing way too fucking much, by the way, I've noticed. Especially today, I don't know why it's been a thing for me. But, like, first of all, the Daleks look rather silly, and that's never been a problem for me. Like, I love it when things look silly, as I just said. But the Dalek scripts that they were actually getting at the time were usually poorly written. And maybe that factors into why they just don't work with the Third Doctor, because the rest of the Third Doctor's era is usually pretty solid. Especially when he's like with the Master, or if it's season 7. 'Cause season 7, S tier season right there. I'm just gonna come out and say it. Probably the best season of classic Doctor Who. Oh, then again, you know what? Season 13 exists. I think season 13 might just barely beat it out. I should do more Doctor Who stuff on this channel. You know, this channel was originally established as a Doctor Who channel, where I would, like, review new episodes and shit. All that content's been deleted when I reformed the channel, but, I've been thinking about doing more Doctor Who stuff, because I quite like Doctor Who, I quite like talking about it. And I reckon I could get into WhoTube, you know, be with the gamers there. I don't know. It's just sort of a passing interest of mine, as I get ready, get going through college and all this other stuff, you know. I never want streaming or YouTube to be more than a hobby for me. Actually, I one day would like to work either like writing, like obviously becoming an author is my main goal, but becoming a writer for like TV or movies and stuff has also been a big goal of mine, because I genuinely enjoy like telling stories, and sort of like Quentin Tarantino does, where he has like control over the project, and he's, you know, he conveys stories in the way that he wants them to be told, and I've always been very interested in that. And I have a deep love for like filmography and stuff. The only downside of that is I've noticed, and I am well aware of my flaw, in that I am a much better ideas man than I am like at writing solid stories. I can write solid stories, but it's like usually I have to work on them for a long time to really get them to a point where they're acceptable. Um, but I can come up with really good ideas for stories, and I just don't always have the capacity or really the will to fully flesh those out into good stories. I miss the photo negative lasers that the Daleks had for a while here. They sort of get replaced later on in Classic Who. I think the last time we see the photo negative lasers, like they were in the Hartnell and Troughton era, the last time we see them is in Genesis of the Daleks, I want to say. Maybe they were in Destiny, but I know they weren't in the Triple R trilogy from the 80s. Remembrance, Revelation, and Revolution. No. Remembrance, Revelation, and I don't know what the first one is. But yeah, I think like I really miss those lasers. It's sort of like the skeleton effect that they use now. Like whenever a Dalek shoots someone, their skeleton shows. And that effect, I don't know how much I really like it. I would prefer, like, if a Dalek shoots someone, just they become sort of photo negative for a split second or so. That'd be an interesting effect, but the skeleton one looks a little too bad sometimes, especially depending on what era you're watching it in. And I don't think, like, just changing the colors on something can rarely ever look terrible. This is something that doesn't get done a lot in New Who, where people get inside Dalek casings and sort of manipulate them around. I don't think that even happens once in New Who. But it happened a lot in Classic Who, you know, where people like masqueraded as Daleks as far back as the original 1963 serial The Daleks. By the way, it's very annoying to have to call that the original 1963 serial The Daleks, but I don't know a way that I could shorten that to like an acceptable level. You know, because obviously when I just say The Daleks, you think I'm talking about the Daleks in the story or the Daleks in general, like as a creature. You don't think instantly, oh, I'm talking about the original serial from 1963 that is called The Daleks. It was much easier when that serial was called The Mutants. But The Mutants is a John Pertwee story from season 9. Before The Mutants in season 9, before that was a serial, the original 1963 serial The Daleks was usually referred to as The Mutants, which I actually prefer as a title for it. Especially because the word Dalek is in way too many Dalek episode titles, but, you know, it pulls in that cash, it pulls in those viewers, so I guess there's that. One thing I haven't mentioned yet, I sort of have mentioned it, and how Planet of the Daleks is like a best hits of the Daleks story, is that Season 10 of Classic Who was in many ways not just it didn't just have like the 10th anniversary special in it, the Three Doctors, which is, by the way, still the best anniversary special that they've ever made, except for maybe Dimensions in Time, obviously. But yeah, by far the Three Doctors, like it goes beyond just having the 10th anniversary special in it. Season 10 as a whole was like a 10th anniversary season. You know, you've got the Three Doctors in there, obviously, to celebrate how far the show's come with all three Doctors. You've got Carnival of Monsters right after it. Yes, I think Carnival of Monsters comes right after it, which has a lot of little clips of aliens or monsters from all over the Whoniverse in it, especially like the notorious only shot of a Cyberman that we ever see in the Pertwee era is in Carnival of Monsters, and it's to make a joke about how terrible the Cybermen are and how Barry Letts didn't like them. You know, so you've got Carnival of Monsters, which in itself, that serial is sort of a mockery of Doctor Who, which I love so much about it, because it immediately follows the Three Doctors. And the Three Doctors, best anniversary special ever, the Three Doctors is all about celebrating Doctor Who and how far it's come. Carnival of Monsters is all about like shitting all over Doctor Who, parodying it. You know, the main, one of the biggest antagonistic forces in that story is the Drashigs, which is an anagram for dish rag. Yeah, as a bit of a spoof on how terrible the special effects were in the time. So you've got Carnival of Monsters, which sort of it's like a tongue-in-cheek poking fun at Doctor Who. Then you've got Frontier in Space, which is just the Master and the Daleks working together. I mean, that's classic, you know. The two at this point in the Whoniverse, they are the two most recognizable villains, especially by season 10 standards. And then you've got Planet of the Daleks, which is going to be nostalgic for a lot of people who love the Daleks and remember Dalek Mania from the 60s, because it uses all these elements from the original Dalek serials, like those 4 or 5 from the Troughton and Hartnell era. I think it was a total of 6 or 7, actually, in the 60s. You know, it's sort of a good callback to all those stories. And then finally, you've got the Green Death, which is there to celebrate UNIT and sort of that aspect of the show. And obviously, it's just a very nice send off for Joe Grant as well, who at this point has been on the show for 3 of its 10 years. So there's something to be said there. But yeah, that it's sort of like I sort of enjoy just watching every serial in season 10, especially together, because it really feels like the entire season is a celebration of 10 years of Doctor Who. Like, hey guys, we made it. We made it to 10 fucking years, and that's pretty cool. So that's really what's interesting about season 10. And it doesn't really happen ever again. Until you could maybe say season 25, but maybe. Anyway, there we go for episode 5 of Planet of the Daleks. We got some gamers sneaking into the Dalek City, pretending to be Daleks, or pretending to be Spyridinians, or pretending to be prisoners. There's a lot of people pretending to be a lot of things in this this episode specifically. But yeah, next time we will meet my favorite Dalek design ever, and we will finally finish off Planet of the Daleks. It's been a hell of a ride, and I'm glad that you guys have been here for it. But yeah, we'll talk about giving a proper send-off in the next one. As for right now, I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.